Now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Cline, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening over the past hour, and I'm got to say this disconnect that's going on right now is profoundly disturbing between one side that wants to pretend that there's nothing wrong, that we can continue to proceed as we have with spending, record spending levels, record deficits, record levels of debt, and that we don't need to worry about debt limits anymore. And the other side, which actually wants to have a frank and honest conversation about the looming crisis that we're facing right now. Director Mulvaney, thank you for being here. Do you believe we should be focused on stabilizing current important programs like Social Security and Medicare to make sure we can maintain them, or on expanding these programs and creating a bunch of new programs on top of them?
Mr. Cline, thank you very much for the question. It's an easy answer. Yeah, to depend on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Faced with that automatic, and let's make it clear, and I know you folks know this as well as anybody, but for folks who might be watching this, those cuts are automatic. Social Security, for example, is not allowed to borrow money. It can only operate with the funds that it has. The day that it runs out of the money that's in the trust fund, it's going to have to unilaterally, last time I looked at it, which was 3 or 4 years ago, was 22%. That, you want to talk about something that will be a shock to the system, would upset everything from small business to just social cohesion. Take Social Security and cut it 25% across overnight. Those are the types of things you should be looking at. How do you shore up those programs before you look at doing new ones? I know, we'll end up spending the money at some point in the future, but sooner or later, people might stop lending you money or might not be happy with you printing more money. It's prudent to take care of the existing programs that help people before you start talking about expanding or creating new ones.
Right. The Social Security trustees project that the trust funds will become depleted in 2033. Although the two funds are legally separate, they're often considered in combination. And the trustees project that the combined trust funds will be depleted in 2034. They projected last year that the combined trust funds would become insolvent because incoming tax revenue would be sufficient to pay only about 78% of scheduled benefits. You have essentially conflicting laws. Under the Social Security Act, beneficiaries would still be legally entitled to their full scheduled benefits. However, the Anti-Deficiency Act prohibits government spending in excess of available funds, so the Social Security Administration would not have legal authority to pay full Social Security benefits on time. Dr. Shiner, you mentioned that there might potentially, if the debt ceiling weren't increased, be a delay of a week or two in a check. Wouldn't this be much, much worse than a delay of a week or two of a Social Security check?
Oh, definitely this would be much worse, but the debt ceiling doesn't really have anything to do with it, right? And so the question is, what do we do to put Social Security on a sounder footing? And then frankly, this kind of rule that they couldn't pay out money is very similar to a debt ceiling. It's like the people are entitled to the money, but the Treasury is not allowed to pay them. Social Security Administration not allowed to pay them.
But you would agree, reclaiming my time, that if we can do something to set Social Security on a firmer foundation and a solid fiscal footing, that the need to increase the debt ceiling would reduce on a similar scale.
It depends what we do. I mean, you can imagine changing that rule and allowing general revenues to be used for Social Security, and then thinking about a more gradual, deliberative process. So it depends on what you did.
Okay, thank you. Director Mulvaney, similar question. Modern monetary theory, or MMT, using the word theory loosely, proponents insist that debt doesn't matter because the government can never run out of money. We can always print more. Many of my colleagues on the other side are proponents of MMT and believe an increasing federal debt is essentially a free lunch. Do you believe that policies based on MMT would be harmful to the economy? And what would you expect that to be the impact on inflation, which is already a problem?
Yeah, we heard the term earlier, I think, when the majority leader was talking about a de facto default, that, when you don't pay money, you've appropriated, it's a de facto default. If I borrow $100 from you, right, I expect $100 back. But if you pay me back in money that's only worth 50 cents, is that a de facto default as well? And that's what modern monetary theory sort of looks at, which is just we can print as much money as we possibly want. My problem with MMT, Mr. Cline, is that it's right until it's not. certainly I'm sympathetic. I mean, there's been folks like me saying that the end was nigh for 30 years. I mean, back during Reagan, we were worried about the debt and the deficits, right? And it hasn't come up to bite us yet. I feel sometimes like I'm a guy on the corner standing up holding the sign saying, repent, the end is near. Sooner or later, though, I'm going to be right. But the MNT works until it doesn't. And I'm not really sure how you get out of the box after you've printed all of that money or borrowed all of that money. How do you then get it back? You don't. So you either deal with dramatic economic slowdowns, inflation, loss of trust in the system. Nothing good comes from MMT.
You have a devaluation of your currency and your economy is in shambles. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman's time